afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Sunset Safari. For those of you who don't know, my name is Jamie, and I have VM, the wildebeest, on camera with me this afternoon. And driving around on Juma is James, along with Jean-Dre on camera. Now, we've had a really exciting time, and I just want to do a quick recap on this afternoon's plan and what happened from this morning. Now, we're sitting with all of these vultures, and the reason behind that is that there's a mysterious dead buffalo in the drainage line off to my right. I've returned to Red Dam. Now, this morning I went off to investigate the smell and found the dead buffalo positioned right down in a really steep part of the drainage line. And then I heard some growling sounds and went and followed up there on the other side of the drainage line and found Tingana and Karula mating. So VM and I have returned to that scene to find out what those two kitty cats have been up to. When we left them this morning, they were seeming a little bit reluctant. Karula gave some rather half-hearted, if I'm honest, attempts to seduce Tingana, but it seems as though he is simply too full, too hot, and not really all that interested at the moment. And if you are a regular viewer, you'll know what I mean when I say I actually don't really blame him. He's been a bit of a Don Juan of the leopard world over the last few days. But if you are joining us for the first time and you're not quite sure what I'm talking about a mating pair of leopards, and you are on a live safari. So everything that you're seeing is happening right here on a blistering hot, apparently 30 degrees, which is around 85 Fahrenheit. I think it's hotter, but that might also just be the humidity that's sitting in the air. It feels, the last few days, it just felt again and again like a build-up of tension towards a storm that just hasn't happened. And it feels exactly the same way this afternoon. I think all of us are covered in alternating layers of a combination of probably sweat and sunblock, most of all. It is really blistering hot. That might also explain why Tingana is not all that interested in the efforts of poor Karula. I'm going to leave these vultures here. Just a bit more explanation. I think that buffalo has fallen. I don't think that it's a kill. I think he was old and he fell into a drainage line and he couldn't get out. It was very thick and steep, and I think that he's the reason behind the full bellies on Tingana and Karula. And luckily for them, it's right in a position where pretty much every scavenger would have quite a tricky time in getting down to it and really eating it, and indeed finding it. Only just started noticing vultures coming this way. Once I'm done here, and if I have any luck finding them, I might head across, because I hear from many of the viewers, including Heidi, Pretty Nightmare, Astralina and John, that there was an enormous herd of elephants seen at the Arathusa Dam camera. And I actually happened to see those pictures. It really did look like the entire ground was just covered in eddies. So we'll head across and see if we can catch up with any of them later. But for now, let's go and investigate the drainage line where we left Tingana and Karula. There's no tracks coming out, so if Karula is done mating with him, she hasn't started heading back to her usual territory just yet. And typically, female leopards will follow the male around that they're mating with at the time when they are in estrus, and then once they're done, they'll head back to their regular territory. So they're not too worried about territorial boundaries when they have other things on their mind. And there's one more part of this whole saga that I haven't got around to. Now, this morning, by the time we left them, it was so hot that it was just time to go home. But we did see Tingana stop and defecate. Now, Tingana, the big male leopard. And Donna Wan, who's watching us from Maine, you wanted to know if I've gone back to collect Tingana's scat, and I haven't. That's part of my plan for this afternoon. I'm going to head there a little bit later. I just wanted to check up on their position first before I do that. And for new viewers, this is all part of a bigger study. We place the scat samples in these little tubes and we send them off across to Panthera. And Panthera does a huge number of different research projects, but one of them is into determining DNA of the leopards of this area, and in particular the paternity, so the male lines of the leopards in this area, because one thing that leopards tend to do, just checking they haven't snuck back here, is they have a tendency to mate with more than one male during their estrus cycle. And it's a very clever way of making sure that that male is tricked into thinking that he is the father of the cubs, regardless of whether he is or he isn't. It's something quite important that we do, and I want to go and get Tingana, because as far as I know, we haven't collected him before. Now, Brent was really lucky. He got Mbula's, I think it was it yesterday? It feels like longer, but it must have been yesterday. He got Mbula's scat yesterday. And now we're going to go and get Tingana's as well. So we're doing quite well with the males. I'm heading back to the place where I last saw them, but keep your eyes peeled. If they're not there, they could well be somewhere very, very close. As I said, hot, tired looking, very full-bellied, might not be that keen to move away from a potentially easy source of food, that is that dead buffalo. It is certainly, though, an interesting experience getting into where they were. Keep your eyes peeled for spots and flicks of their white tail, or the white tip of their tail. They could well still be in the vicinity. I haven't seen their tracks coming out. Well, it was hopeful, but unlikely. Leopards are not like lions. They don't tend to stick around exactly where we left them, unfortunately. Now it becomes a question of which way did they go? I think that it might be time to do a little bit of investigating. I want to hop out and just explore around here, see if I can figure out which direction they went into. And in the meantime, I believe that James has some hippos at Buffelshoek, so let's head across to him so he can say hello to you for this afternoon, and I will be back with you a little bit later.
Good afternoon everybody, and welcome to Buffelshoek Dam, where a single hippopotamus has been used as an island by two serrated hinged terrapins until we arrived. The temperature earlier this morning was like that of the iron core in the middle of the earth, and then a wind moving roughly at the same speed as the particles around the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland has come up. That means it's moving very fast indeed. It's blown my hat off at least 4 times. Very strange weather conditions. And as is so often the case, the meteorological societies of various websites that we've checked for the weather have less idea as to what's going on with the weather than I do with the amount of cooking that we have going on in the camp. Now, sorry everybody, mild confusion in the air there. Anyway, here we are at Buffelshoek Dam. The sun is out. It's a fairly pleasant temperature out here, and the hippopotamus is as we left him this morning, except, well, no, he's not actually. He went out of the water this morning and he's come back. You can see how the water is drying up at a rapid rate. And it was a very, it's been a very hot day. Like I say, the wind has come up, and I think that's going to make the evaporation in a little dam like this even more. And so I don't think, unless we get some pretty big rain fairly soon, that this dam is going to last. But both Jandre and I agreed that despite the fact that the wind is blowing, as you can hear it doing now, lost my hat almost. It's actually quite an exciting feeling around the place. I don't know if it's going to blow in any rain. There's certainly a large bank of clouds coming in behind us. We've come into this area hopefully to find Mvula again. Yeah, we'll see what we can find. We did find some tracks this morning. They disappeared pretty quickly though off the road, and because of the wind and the substrate, the hardness of the ground, I couldn't tell exactly where he'd gone. But we're in the area, and with any luck we'll find him today. So please remember, my name is James Henry. You don't have to remember that, but you do have to remember that you're on a live safari. Gendre is on camera. Hello, Gendre. Dressed in a startling array again, of a kind of it's a shirtless waistcoat basically that looks like he went on a bad fishing trip. And the other thing you have to remember is that we'd like to talk to you continuously throughout the drive. Hashtag Safari Live or questions at wildearth.tv. Right, I've waffled on nonsensically for long enough, and we'll head off to see if we can find the recalcitrant and very magnificent Mvula the leopard. Okay, here we go. Righty-ho. First port of call is going to be to take the road around here called Gwari Pan Road, which we didn't drive today, and maybe he will be lurking about there somewhere. This particular area is quite difficult for tracking leopards because it is very thick in the bush, as you can see. The signal is sometimes not very good, but it's still a good haunt for Mvula. I've seen him here once. In fact, Gendre and I saw him on Gendre's first drive. He came walking straight past us, and he walked straight into that bush there, and then it was impossible to find him. We found his tracks a few times in there of late, but until Brent saw him the other day, yesterday in fact, we hadn't seen him again. So I'm rather looking forward to seeing him. So like I was saying, Gendre and I were both agreeing that despite the fact that this wind is slightly odd, it feels quite exciting. It feels like there's an air of expectation in the atmosphere, which is marvelous. May make for a slightly difficult speech into the camera because of the wind, but I think we'll get by. The sorted wind filters, etc. Am I still poking? Very slowly along, see if we can pick up some tracks, peer deep into the bushes. Of course, with the sunshine in the afternoon, it's likely that he'll be lying down in some pretty thick bush as opposed to walking along the road. But as this wind comes up, of course the hunting conditions for him are much better and much improved, because any prey animals that he wishes to set upon will not have the hearing that they might otherwise, and certainly they won't have the smell either. It's a swirling kind of wind. So very difficult, if an animal does pick up his scent, very difficult for them to try and figure out where the scent's coming from. And flowers coming out after the little bit of rain that we've had, and the grasses are also starting to shoot now, which is great for the animals. It's not excellent for game viewing, of course, because it does mean that the animals can move away from the concentrated bits of grazing that there are, and so the herds become a bit smaller. Buffalo herds will become smaller, the elephant herds will become a bit smaller. I nearly said effluent, but that isn't in fact a word at all. So now we're in and around the area where I'm hoping that he might have walked, so we could maybe pick up his tracks. Of course, this wind will make the tracking a little bit more difficult. Never know, and if we don't find him, I'm sure we'll find something else exciting. like us to find Mbula or a tortoise for you for your birthday? I fear me that both of those are quite difficult requests. I don't have a tortoise, but I have another shelled animal for you. Stand by. Susan, you can consider this a kind of warm-up, not your main birthday present. Now, this is the shell of a giant land snail, which has a longevity, as one of our very kind viewers told me once, of about 10 to 15 years. And during the wintertime, they put a sort of crust of sand over the top, and then they survive the dry season like that. Now, this has the shell of a spider in it. There's no more snail in it, and I don't think anything else will make a home necessarily of this. But the interesting part to me is this here, where it's been eaten, it's been scraped away, and that could well have been by a tortoise, and a tortoise needs lots of calcium to make that shell, Susan. So your birthday present's been chewing on the snail shell, I think, and we will try and find the perpetrator of this dent in the snail's shell as we drive along looking for the leopards. Yeah. There you are, Susan. Happy birthday, on demand, leopard tortoise. One does what one can, doesn't one, John Ray?
Always.
And one feels very happy when one does succeed with blind luck in one's favour. Susan, we'll go and have a closer look at him now. Can you see him from there?
Yeah.
There we go. I'm not going to pick him up. I think you probably by now all know the story. We don't want them to. He's quite far from water. If we pick him up, he'll probably void his bowels, and that can cause dehydration. Look at him go. Beautiful example of a leopard tortoise. With lots of black on his shell, which lots of them don't. Isn't that great? Looks like a male to me, with a very enclosed bottom, tail. That carapace, or the top of the shell, is normally slightly hollower, or slightly less pronounced around the back in the females. He's moving at quite a speed. Isn't he sweet? I'll move a little bit forward. There we go. And you can see what a clever colour he is. I mean, he's really nicely camouflaged there. He's on a real mission, this fellow. And all around you can hear that wind blowing. Lovely. And he'll be loving the new green grass as well. They love to eat grass. They'll eat a few flowers and that sort of thing as well, but they're purely herbivorous. Whereas the Speaks hinged tortoise, which is the other one that we get here, much rarer than him, actually specializes in eating those giant land snails that we saw. Well, not specializes, but they will eat them. Alright, let's leave this tortoise to himself. There you are, Susan. Happy birthday. Not bad going. You asked and you received. Right, great excitement. Jamie has found, well, not Mbula, but I think the next best thing. And I'll see you just now.
And from discussions of a leopard tortoise to an actual leopard, and one that we have to say a big thank you to VM for spotting the spotted cat, we have a rather, in my opinion, relieved looking Tingana with Karula absolutely nowhere in sight. I think she might be on her way back home. He's giving that sore paw a bit of a clean. For those of you who might have missed it, and I know that it's been something you've seen a couple of times, but he is limping, and it seems as though it's his right front paw that's giving him grief. And I know we had a request for a close-up of the right front paw so we could see. I will change angles, but so far I can't see any obvious injury. Doesn't look like a wound. It might be a sore tendon, but I could stand corrected if we get it from a different angle. But he seems fine. And almost, I think it must be my imagination, but I feel like he seems a little bit happier. He was looking quite under pressure when we saw him last. Now, there's a possibility that she's still around. She might have gone to that buffalo carcass. Fortunately for VM and myself, the wind has changed direction and is gently wafting scents of it across in our direction. But it doesn't seem to bother him too much, so I suppose we'll have to not let it bother us. He's doing a very, very thorough cleaning exercise. Just a rough idea of where we are. We went up over the side of that drainage line back towards Red Dam and the buffalo, and we bumped into him here. I think that was probably all the movement he was capable of. Now you can see, if you missed the sunrise safari, you can see that enormously big belly of his, and it is a predator's gift to be able to gorge and gorge and gorge until you really look, it looks as though they really couldn't fit anything else in their stomachs, and it pushes up their diaphragm even, and you get them panting in the same way that Tingana is now. Not quite as bad as it was earlier, but it's also not quite as hot, I think, with all this breeze. At least he's managing to cool down. Look at that belly. Panting away. I'm going to hang out here with him and see what he does, but I'd also like to at least, if not see Karula, get an idea as to where she's disappeared off. Oh, itchy, itchy, itchy. Yeah, mister. The back of your neck doesn't look nearly as uncomfortable as Karula's does. Karula's is looking a little bit bitten and shabby. Oh, shame. I think there are parts of Tingana that are feeling a little bit tender, and it's not just his foot. Typical cat pose. That flexibility level is quite incredible. Foot overhead. I'm sure many of you will have seen your cats do that before when they're wanting to have a nice clean up. Now we're sitting with this incredibly beautiful male leopard, but we will at some point have to leave him and go off exploring other avenues. And one thing that was reported is that the Birmingham boys were on the Arathusa, or at least were in the vicinity of the Arathusa property. As far as I know, they were close to Elephant Plains. So Susan, you were wondering if I have any reports on the lions. Now this morning, 2 lions were reported as being seen at the Arathusa Dam camera at about 2 o'clock in the morning. Now as far as I know, they haven't been seen since. At least not this morning, but I'll double check with the guides when I bump into somebody. I have tried the Game Drive channel, but it's a bit, on a windy day like this, it seems to blow in all the static and makes listening a bit difficult. The Birmingham boys, it seems, are on Elephant Plains, but only just. So I am going to make my way back across to there. In terms of the females that were seen on the dam camera, I honestly don't know which ones they were, but they were not on Arathusa by the time we started our sunrise safari. At least we get to spend some time with a rather exhausted... Oh, it's windy. I think this is probably the windiest day I've experienced in the Sabi Sands. And it shows absolutely no sign of abating. You can see how the trees are bending double, and I'm having to raise my voice just a little bit in order to be heard. It's definitely really, really hot, but really windy. And it's blowing in all of the dust, it's making me sneeze. But Tingana doesn't seem too bothered. It seems as though this is the way he wants to spend his afternoon. At least it's cooler for him. I'm just wondering whether it's not blowing in a storm. And this leopard is as exhausted as they come, because he's been slowly rotating through the 3 females within his territory, and possibly even a 4th, we're not quite sure. But now leopard mating, we've just caught the end of it, but at its height it can happen about 5 or 6 times an hour, possibly even more right in the beginning, and it happens for 5 days straight, 5 to 7 days straight actually. So you can just do the calculations in your head. I did them this morning very roughly. It comes up to about 650, 700 individual mating sessions for one pairing. Oh, did something blow into your nose, boy? And Donna, you were wondering why they have to mate so much, and it's something that we spoke about a little bit this morning, but maybe actually I didn't cover it fully. So the male's penis is barbed, which is why when you watch the whole mating process, he grabs her by the back of the neck, because withdrawal is actually quite painful for her. And it means that she turns around and tries to swat him, which is why he grabs her until the act is finished, and then she turns around and gives him a good clip around the ear or around the legs, just to remind him that she's not very impressed, even though she wanted it in the first place. And it's something that's really interesting. You see it in lions and leopards, all of the big cats. It's stimulated ovulation, so she needs that little bit of pain in order to bring her into what is essentially full estrus. So she releases the eggs to be fertilized. And it's wondering what he was looking at. It's a way of essentially ensuring that the best male gets an opportunity to mate with her. So she starts mating with a male, and she gives any bigger, stronger males the opportunity to come along and try and usurp that male, and then actually falls pregnant. So she's getting the best genetics possible for her offspring. It also means that she can move around and move between males and keep them a little bit confused as to who the father might actually be. Although in this case Tingana appears to have had the run-of-the-mill experience with all of them. They don't seem to be looking any further afield. And I think it must be quite exhausting for him. We have an interesting question. I found this leopard this morning because I was in the drainage line investigating a leopard carcass. And Donna Wan, you wanted to know a little bit more about the geology of that drainage line. And quite a lot of it is rhyolite and basalt rocks. Very high in iron, it's quite rich in red, and it's very steep. So it's been quite worn down by the flow of water from Red Dam, or into Red Dam. And the one thing about Arathusa is that it is a giant seep line, which essentially means it's got a bedrock, a very solid rock, overlaid with soil. So the water hits the bedrock, flowing through the soil, and then flows downhill. It's a very simplified version of it. But it does mean that in those points where that water collects, it forms some really nice dramatic drainage lines around the area. And this particular one has obviously got some fertile soils in it because it's got plenty of vegetation surrounding it. Very, very steep, as I said. Not an easy drainage line to navigate. Oh, that's very pretty. I'll try and get this. I think this is called a maiden, but there's lots of different types and they're quite easy to get confused. But look how beautiful it is. Sorry, this is very contorted for me, but I don't want it to fly away. An interesting exercise in shoulder twisting, but it's perfect Christmas colors, red and shiny green. Very beautiful little thing. As I said, I'm not exactly sure as to what it's called. My original thought was it was a maiden, but which specific kind? There's a couple of different kinds. I'll have to go and look up, or maybe you guys can tell me. You've been so good in this particular respect, and this is one of my weak spots in terms of knowledge out here, is the incredible vast array of insects and moths that we find. Oh, he blew off. It is a beautiful, beautiful creature. Very, very striking. As always, you can send those through to #SafariLive on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@wildearth.tv. And it's amazing how the bugs and the moths, oh, bye-bye, I can untwist my arm. It was sort of a bit of a shoulder contortion. It's amazing how much they differ from my sort of areas of longer experience in different parts of the country to here. There's just such a vast array of different things. Just wanted to double check on what Tingana was up to, and he's passed out again. There is a lot of noise you might have heard, and that is the Jacobin cuckoos that have been calling behind me. You can't see them at the moment, but if you were hearing that while I was talking about the insect, then that's what they are. Sure. Very interesting question raised by Barbara, who is a South African. And Barbara, you wanted to know if a leopard is caught outside of a game reserve area. And there are lots and lots of them. They are all around the various farms in the area. They move through communities, mostly unseen and untroubled. You wanted to know if one of them is caught and transferred to a game reserve, is that fair on the leopard, especially since there will already be established territories there? And then further to that, would it be worse for a male or a female? And that's a really good question, but it's quite a complex one. Do I think it's fair? I think it's fairer than the alternative. For the most part, leopards actually don't do very much serious damage, and they wander around. There are far more of them than we ever realize, wandering through farms and through townships, quite unseen and not bothering anybody. It is, of course, when they become really difficult, if they focus on people's livestock, which is highly, highly unusual, actually, and something that they could be compensated for. The only real reason where you need to remove them is if they're in a high density population area. In my personal opinion, there will be those who disagree with me. It's better than the alternative, and the alternative is to have them euthanized. So it's not ideal, but yes, they will have to be and put into a different reserve. Jacobin is making such a noise. I'll try and find him for you in a moment, the bird that's making that call. They are territorial, obviously, and both males and females are territorial. I think personally it's probably worse for a male, but again, it can be done really carefully. So you can look for areas where there's just a little bit of a population vacuum because of the nature of the way that things have developed over the years, and it's a natural vacuum that they can then fill. But again, remember, that depends on the age of the leopard. So a young leopard might be easier to introduce into an area. He can establish himself. He goes through essentially the same process anyway, growing up in a reserve naturally. An older male might have a harder time, and it's then a matter of really careful judgment. I think the males have it a little bit worse than the females, just because of the nature of the really big males, the fact that they're more likely to come to physical conflict if they encounter each other. Females, for the most part, although it does happen, for the most part they move away. Once they might growl at each other a bit and then they move away. But it's a difficult question, it's a very complex question, and personally I feel like if there's animals that are living wild, they've probably been living wild for years and not bothering anybody, then they should probably be left. But it's a little bit more complex than that, and I recognize that. Not really the point where I can go into that conversation, then maybe the depth that it needs. But it's a really good question, it's an important one, because unfortunately, given the nature of the way that conservation is, a lot of conservation is mitigating the conflict areas between wild animals and human settlements. Essentially how it goes is it's a battle that's gone back a very long time. Not necessarily a battle, but it sometimes turns into one. He is absolutely fast asleep. He is so exhausted. And since Mr. Tingana is quite asleep, I think I might do a loop around and go and see what else I can find within this block before returning to him. And whilst I do that, I'm going to send you back across to James to see what he's been up to with his afternoon, and I will catch up with you a little bit later.
We are driving down a central road in the middle of Djuma, trying to find some tracks of this recalcitrant young male leopard. Well, he's not that young anymore, I suppose. And I'm afraid nothing has come up yet. The expectation as the wind blows and this cloud comes over continues to grow. So it feels like something exciting is going to happen. So we're driving slowly down here, looking for many interesting things. We did see a duiker, it ran away. We saw a squirrel, it too ran away. We also saw a brown snake eagle, which is very nice. Beautiful birds. And I was asked once, do they eat only brown snakes? And I said, well, in the same way that a black-breasted snake eagle only eats black-breasted snakes. They are called brown snake eagles because they are brown, not because they eat brown snakes. Now, we're driving along a drainage line here, a dry riverbed, and the leopards do like to hang around in and around them, so we're just driving around here hoping that we might see him resting up in the shade of a tree, or maybe up in the leafy boughs of a marula. At the moment, not much. We also saw another tortoise, by the way. Susan, it is our great pleasure to have shown you that leopard tortoise for your birthday. Our great pleasure. I hope it was fun. Certainly we enjoyed it. I love seeing tortoises, and I hope maybe that we'll see a serrated hinged, no, not a serrated hinge, that's the terrapin, a speaks hinged tortoise, because they're actually really interesting. We'll show how their shells work. And then Teresa in Virginia Beach. You want to know, is there a way to age a tortoise from his shell? There is sort of, but it's not very easy. You can count, a bit like, you know, if you chop a tree down, you can count the rings in a tree. So the little patches on the tortoise's back have got rings that indicate each year. So there's a way of doing it like that, but in years of poor nutrition and years of good nutrition, they'll grow at different rates, and I think sometimes it's not a particularly accurate way of looking at them. So there are ways to do it. I wouldn't back myself 100% to tell you exactly how old a tortoise was if I found it. But yes, there are certainly ways. We have ways and means. Right, we're coming now to the Umlulwati drainage line, or little river. I think we'll go straight through it. Now, good afternoon to you, PK. On the subject of the chelonids, or shelled reptiles that we get here, you want to know, when do turtles lay their eggs? Now, I'm not sure if you really mean turtles. I'm just looking, sorry, PK, there seems to be a bit of a drag mark. No, it's elephants dragging their feet. PK, out here, when we refer to turtles, we mean sea-dwelling reptiles with the shells. So a leatherback and a green and a hawksbill turtle, those would be turtles that live in the sea. And then there are the terrapins, which are the freshwater sort of turtles, if you like, that live in the pans here, in the dams, and in some of the temporary little puddles even, we get terrapins. And then you get the tortoise, which is completely land-based. And we got the leopard tortoise and the speaks-hinch tortoise. So I'm going to assume that you mean the tortoises to start with, and you want to know when they lay their eggs. And I have to tell you that I'm not entirely sure. I think it's round about now, you know. I think that we saw a couple mating the other day, so it's probably round about now. And I think they are pretty seasonal breeders. But I think that it's probably round about now that they're going to do the bulk of their breeding, PK. Nice big surprise with Jamie. Don't know what it is. Hope it's good. See you just now.
Now, on this windy afternoon, I thought I'd just leave Tingana for the moment and come back quickly to collect his leopard scat. Now, I'm not going to get out of the car, and I wonder if you can spot why. Let's just have a look at the moment. Somebody has arrived to explore the possibility of the buffalo kill. Would you look at that? They were a bit of a surprise, I'm not going to lie. It wasn't quite what I was expecting. I was about to jump out and go and look for Karula. There appears to be a pride of lions in my way. And that would explain why all of the vultures are on the ground as well. Now, I'm going to go a little bit closer. I suspect it's the Tsalalas, just looking at those young males, but let's sneak a little bit closer so that we can have a look. How exciting is that? Leopard and lions within 100 meters of each other. And the leopard could not be more unconcerned, and I'm sure he knows these guys are here. I am glad I looked before I jumped out to go and find the leopard scat, because I might have chased them into the drainage line. Hello, girlie. Oh, Smelly's here. We might also have our answers to who was at the dam camera, or who was on the dam camera. I can only count 3 lions here, but the rest of them are probably on that buffalo kill. These guys have moved up out of the drainage line because it's a little bit cooler. Oh, somebody's got a very full belly as well. One thing I haven't done, and you'll have to excuse me for one moment, and I don't think it's too much of a problem, but I'm just going to call in on the radio and let the guys know that they are here. But how exciting is this? Very round, very full bellies. Now only essentially the second time I've ever seen the Tsalala pride. I know that after I went on leave, they stuck around for a little bit. So it's still novelty. very novel lions. And for people joining us, or viewers joining us for the first time, and a bit unsure about the dynamics, that is a very young male that you're looking at on your screen, probably about 2 years old, possibly even just a little bit younger, but around 2. There's 3 of them of that age, most likely brothers or cousins. And then from my experience, there's 2 females, one young one and one without a tail, who's slightly older. But it might be a dynamic that's shifting around a lot. And the reason that these guys are so far from their home range of essentially Londolozi, although they do pop up here every now and again, I'm told, but the reason that they're all the way up here is because they've been pushed up, somewhat ironically, by the Matimba males. Now, the Matimba males were the 2 dominant males that were in this area before they were pushed further south by the Birmingham boys. And the Birmingham boys terrorized the prides that were under the Matimba's control, and the Matimbas promptly disappeared off to the south and terrorized the Tsalalas for a little bit. But things are calming down, as far as I know. I think the reason that this little group of pride, because there's a couple of segments of the Tsalala pride itself, I think the reason that this one is pushed up so far is because of these young boys. They're probably most at risk. They're just at that wrong age, and when I first saw them, I noticed that one of them had quite a large injury on his, I think it was his back left hip. Nasty looking injury. It looked deep and it looked like it had come from a conflict with another lion. And I'm not sure, but I think it might be the one on the right. It's hard for me to tell at this angle. There's a bit of a scar on his back either way, and on his bottom. It might be him. And as I said, I'm sure the rest of them are tucked away in that drainage line with the buffalo, but there's absolutely no way I can get to them at the moment from where I think the buffalo is. I think essentially to get there I would probably have to drive directly where these 2 lions are lying. Might be the only open patch that I can find. That was a nice surprise. Haven't even been out for an hour and a half and we've found leopards and lions, all within very close proximity of each other. As I said, just bear with me for one moment. I do need to just go onto the Game Drive channel and call this in. Yeah, stations I've got Shlamingala, just north of that, Nyari Bamba by Red Dam. Shlamingala looks like Tsalalas. Interestingly, just as I called that in between bursts of static, it sounds as though the Majingalane males, who I think were at least fairly originally dominant over the Tsalalas, it sounds as though they are close to Elephant Plains with the rest, or 2 of the Tsalala breakaway females. I think that's what was said, but it might be something I'll have to confirm a bit later with the guides. Now, I mentioned earlier about enormous bellies and panting, and that's exactly what we're seeing here with this female. She's looking absolutely exhausted. I wonder when these lions, I'll try that again, sentence went a bit wrong. But I wonder when these lions did turn up here. I actually almost wonder if they were here when we found those leopards before. It wouldn't be unheard of for lions and leopards to be in very, very close proximity. I didn't see them when I was investigating the buffalo carcass, and I was standing just on the other side of the drainage line. But maybe if they were completely flat. But then, as I said, I think Tingana and Karula were feeding on the buffalo, so maybe they've just arrived. But I think, personally, there's a good chance that these were the lions that were seen on the Arathusa Dam camera last night. If they were two females. I don't actually know. The heat is definitely broken as well. The clouds are advancing, and I'm sure that for lions like this must be a welcome relief from the earlier heat of the day. It is something that I mentioned when I first saw them, or at least I was asked about before. And Carla, you were saying that you would love to see Junior join up with these three young boys and form a much stronger coalition. Now, Junior is the sub-adult lion, basically an adult male lion. He's almost at that stage, from the Nkuhuma Pride. And he is at the age where it's time for him to go off on his own. But it must be a really terrifying prospect to be a young male lion heading off all on your own without the support of any brothers or cousins. And of course that's why males form coalitions, is because they just add that little extra sense of security and safety. Now these three young males, as difficult a position as they have been in, they will always have each other, and when they do separate from the pride, they will separate together. Now it's not impossible, it's unlikely, but it's not impossible that Junior could join up with them. The only problem is that Junior's probably got another year or so, or even more, to wait until these males are old enough to separate away from their pride. But it's definitely not unheard of and not unusual. Are you sitting up, boy? For males to join together even if they're not related. Lions are actually not too picky about who they form coalitions with. They're quite happy to join up with unrelated males. This young boy, with just a hint of a mohawk coming through, he's definitely a good year or so younger than Junior, probably about a year and a half. He's very, very young still. But lions, as I said, are not picky, because each member of a coalition will probably get a chance to mate with a female and pass on their genetics. Oh, there's that scar, or there's a scar. Some of that almost looks fresh-ish. There's still a little bit of pink showing as it's healing. And those, at least that wound on his bottom there at the top of his tail, I think looks like a puncture wound. Shame, little one, been through the wars. Yes. Oh, it's exhausting. I mean, not to complain or anything. You know, we've just had an afternoon of leopard and lion within a few hundred meters of each other. But there are some smaller cats that roam around, and Barbara, you were wondering if I've ever seen any of them. So for viewers not acquainted with the South African wildlife, or the low-veld wildlife, out here we get a couple of smaller hunting cats known as servals, caracals, African wildcat. There's a couple of other little cat species that are far less common and far less frequently seen. Now, I have yet to see one, Barbara. I believe that there have been a couple of serval sightings on LiveSafari drives. I'm not too sure about caracal. I don't know, have you seen a caracal? No. It depends on the area that you're in. With such a high leopard density as is in the Sabi Sands, it makes life a little bit more difficult for those tinier hunting cats. They are around. They will definitely be here. in other areas I've worked in, I used to work in a place that had no lions and no spotted hyenas. It was a reserve. I've worked there very seldom, but it was a reserve that was in the process of being rehabilitated. And I saw a lot more in the way of rare species like the African wildcat. And of course, the biggest threat to African wildcat, especially in an area like this, will be exposure to domestic cats, so feral cats or cats from the local communities that might stray in and wander around, and if they are not neutered or spayed, then they mate with the other bloodline. Where did you come from? There's the third male. I don't see him. Hello, boy. Have you been eating buffalo? It's not very nice buffalo anymore. It's a bit been sitting in the heat of the drainage line, slowly cooking. Yes, he's definitely been eating away. And I have to be honest, I think lions are extraordinary looking, but I have a certain soft spot for them when they're at this kind of age. It's that slightly gangly teenage look, where they have not really come into their manes at all. And they just look a little bit almost vulnerable in a way. And maybe that's just because I know that they are. And he's giving himself a good clean after that buffalo meal. And when I stuck my nose down there this morning, there was still plenty of meat on it, which is actually what originally led me to suspect that it had fallen into the drainage line. So at least these lions are getting a solid meal. The nice thing about watching these three young boys is that the bonds between male lions somehow stay or seem to be far, far stronger than the bonds between females and males, or even females and each other. Actually, the young males show far more affection. If you watch the Birmingham boys, whenever they leave each other and they walk back and reunite, even if it's just from one patch of shade to the next, they so often go and rub heads. And that's a combination of practical scent marking, rubbing each other's scents on each other's faces, and then I think there's a little bit of affection involved. Still cleaning those feet. Rolling over, looking very happy with life and definitely well fed. But as I said, there's a couple of wounds on the males that look fairly fresh. And Debbie, you're watching all the way from Vancouver. You heard that they had a confrontation with the Nkuhumas, and could those wounds possibly be from that? The answer is yes, I think, and this is the young male that I was referring to. I was on leave and haven't heard the full report yet as to what happened, and obviously I think it's something that I need to chat to other guides about who were in the area. But it could well be. It's quite often when prides have confrontations, there's a lot of noise and maybe a nip or two, but for the most part it doesn't get as incredibly physical and actually incredibly dangerous as, say, an encounter with males that are part of the coalition. So it could well be that he just got in the way and the Nkuhumas were not too impressed with his presence and bit him on the bottom. We better hope it's actually that scenario. It's far better for him, because typically prides are not going to do as much damage as they would, as a coalition of males would do. But it could be. It does happen where they come to blows physically. It suddenly got really cold and really cloudy. Definitely some crazy weather happening out here in the Sabi Sands. But yeah, it could well be a conflict between the Nkuhumas and the Tsalalas. It is bound to happen when a pride like this one moves out of its sort of typically established home range. Now, you can't really think of it as pictures of, or pieces of a jigsaw in terms of pride dynamics. The one will overlap with the home range of the other, but they typically stay out of their way. They stay out of each other's way. When the one pride is in the north of their territory, the other might push up into the south of that territory. But then for a breakaway like this that is trying to keep their young males safe and to move as far away and out of both the Birmingham and the Matimba males' attention, it means that they automatically then start to push into other home ranges of other territories. I'm still looking for that female without the tail. I haven't seen her just yet.
There's a female back there.
Is there a female?
I just saw the ears. I think she's down now.
I think VM's also spotted what Laura in Pennsylvania has spotted, which was an ear twitching somewhere in the back. I definitely can't see her from my angle, but at least we know she's there. The odd ear twitch every now and again, and in a moment what I'll do is I'll reposition. But let's just stick with here for now. Are we sitting with the gentle waves of buffalo scent every now and again getting to us? It hasn't been too bad. But Christine in North Carolina, I touched on it a little bit earlier, but in terms of how that buffalo may have died, I actually think it's a possibility that he tripped down into the drainage line. That being said, animals are very short. Footed. The other possibility might be likely as well is that he was old, he was a little bit ill, and tuberculosis. Able to get up. Either way, roughly at a guess, maybe 40 meters. It's just over the tip of the drainage line that we can see behind the lions, and lying in there. There's a couple of vultures hanging around. With them in the tree, and I realize now, of course, that's why they haven't descended onto the carcass. It's because there's an entire pride of lions guarding it, and they tend to be quite possessive about their food. There we go. One or two still sitting on that tree. From a sitting bird to a flying bird, I believe that James has another feathered friend to show us all, so let's head across to him for now, and I'll be back with you a little bit later.
He's still there, everybody, that is a black-breasted snake eagle. It's one of the only birds that is able to hover in mid-air like that. There are two we get here. One is called a black-shouldered kite, and the other is that, the black-breasted snake eagle. It's really special to see it like that. And you can see it's facing due east. There is an enormous weather system moving in here. And you can hear and feel the wind. You can see the cloud, the sky has gone totally grey. I'm just going to try and get underneath this magnificently clever bird. Now, of course, if he turns around, turns even slightly, he's going to be flung at a hell of a speed to the north or to the west. Look at him go. Look at him. See how he folds his wings there. Ah, it's wonderful. We'll try and keep up with him. We don't know if it's going to rain or not. Okay, we'll try and go forward. Now the slight movement of feathers on his legs and on his wings, dropping his leg, maintained, and disappeared off to the west. See that often at all. Marvelous. There you've got an idea of what's blowing in here. That's to be honest. I don't think that that's necessarily a giant windstorm, at least rainstorm. It's definitely a windstorm. And we can feel quite a lot of coof on it. Gendre is, with the wind, obviously, the risk season is fire. And Safari Shari, you want to know, with this wind and the dryness, could there be a fire risk? No. I'm just going to stop right exactly why it's not a risk. Right, so Gendre, if you can just sort of point the camera into this open area here, I'll get out and demonstrate what I mean. So, you can see here, this is a white bird, right? Out here the grass is the main. We've had another 30 after that, and there's enough greenness and moisture in the soil to negate any kind of risk of fire at the moment. So Safari Shari, no, I don't think we're going to have any kind of fire. There are three things that fire needs to move. I remember that there are three things. Whether I remember what those three things are, I'm not sure. One is the ambient temperature. It's got to be pretty hot. The other is humidity, and then the other is four things. Sorry, ambient temperature, humidity, wind, and also the fuel load. Are you happy with that, Gendre?
Yes,
okay. Those four things. And we don't have a fuel load here. We've got wind, we don't have heat, and we've got lots of humidity. So the chances of a fire here are almost negligible. Right, on we go. The temperature's dropped, I would say 15 degrees almost from when we went out. Quite amazing. Let's go Impala Road. I don't think that's rain. I think we're going to be alright rain-wise. Just dust.
We do apologise for that. The satellite was going a little bit haywire, so we had some signal issues, but look who we found. Well, actually it was VM again, if I'm honest. The wildebeest found her. We were going back towards Tingana and Karula just popped herself out and went down for a drink at the dam. We were just saying, as I was doing a U-turn away from the lions, to say we think maybe Karula might still be in the area. And she certainly proved that she was. Hello, girl. Now, interestingly, Tingana's made his way down to the dam as well, and he's moved up the drainage line a little bit towards where that buffalo carcass is. Now, as I said, I'm certain he knows the lions are there. She's going that way as well. This could be a very interesting moment. Now, I know that I can only travel so far up that drainage line, but I'm going to stay with her for as long as possible before we have to reposition. Gorgeous girl. As you can see, there is another vehicle in front of where Karula's walking. I can't see him anymore. Oh, she's going to go up and out. That's actually easier for us. Let's try and stay with her in that way. She's jogging. Where is she jogging to? Oh, Tingana's up. Must be up there. Where'd she go? Oh, she flopped down there. She's playing. I think she's there. He is. Here's Tingana. Hold on for one moment. She's still trying her seduction. They haven't finished mating. What an epic afternoon. Okay, let's go. Try and do this fairly quickly. That was amazing. Did you see how she went and played with him? Being 40 for a leopard that I thought was done with her whole mating experience. Maybe they were just too tired and too hot and too full this morning. Oh, it's windy. Where'd you go? Where'd you go, kitty cat? Here we go. Got them on our left. I'm just going to stop here for the moment. I want to see what she's going to do, what he's going to do. I think he wants to go. Oh, he's going to lie down there. Is she going to try flirting with him? He is surveying his domain. Just a rough distance and a rough update. The Tsalala pride are feeding close to a buffalo kill, probably about 50 meters away from these two mating leopards. Look at Karula. I think the drop in temperature has given her a new lease on life. A little bit of scent marking. Is she going to go flirt with him again? I think she is. Forward a little bit. Here we go, the mating leopard dance. I'm sorry, this is our best position for getting them. Our signal's terrible in the drainage lines, so we have to be at this angle. But look at that, looking down on them. He's not interested, still not interested. She's going to rub herself into whatever she's found on the ground. Hear her purring. I'll shift around, Liam, so that I can help you out there. Let's just see if she continues. Hitting him with her rear end, smacking him in the face with her tail. Here we go. Come on, Tingana. Last little bit as she rolls over, the lordosis reflex. And she definitely looks like a happy cat. Approaching this whole process with much more enthusiasm than she has in the past. A bit earlier when it was too hot. He looks a little bit more awake as well, unless I'm imagining things. No matter how many times you see it, watching leopards mate is still the most incredible sight. from Tingana to Karula. An incredible difference in their size, especially in that powerful neck. Amazing stuff. I think somewhere in this entire process I have driven over somebody's scat. I'm not sure if it's leopard or lion, but I just get the odd whiff of it coming through. Oh, that was incredible. They are amazing creatures. I'm going to shift around slightly so that we can get a view of them from a different angle. Oh, it's going to be tricky to find a good spot here, and whilst I try and look for one so that we don't put anybody else on TV, we'll head across to James for a cameo link and be back with these two very, very shortly.
So we've been driving around since you last saw us, and we've come across a little sort of couple of zebra, and he's exhibiting an interesting behavior called phlegmon. There you can see him, well, you could see him doing it. I'm just going to move a little bit closer. He'd bent his top lip up like this. And what he was doing is testing the female in front of him. Now Jean-Ray thought she looked quite pregnant, but she might not be. Now I think she is pregnant. But that feminine behavior that the male was doing behind her is to test whether she's ready to mate or not. And if she's that pregnant, I think it's highly unlikely. Let's just watch them through here. There's the rest of the kinship group. A whole lot of zebra now, and a whole lot of kudu as well. Very lovely. Ooh, they're frolicking around in the wind. Now Genevieve in New York City, where I imagine the wind probably blows more than it does here during your winter times, you want to know if they can smell better or worse in this time of, when it's windy like this, and does it affect their smelling of human beings? Genevieve, this wind will dissipate most smells. It's swirling, it's not coming necessarily from the same direction, so what it will probably do is create a sort of the animals won't smell it as obviously as they would if it was a gentle breeze blowing towards them. That said, it is coming predominantly from the east, so if we were right on the eastern side of these zebras, then absolutely they would smell us pretty quickly. But that's why they're a bit more skittish in the wind. They can't hear and they can't smell nearly as well as they could if it was still. I'm just going to move a little bit forward. There's a kudu staring at us in utter astonishment. There she is. And she too, with those huge satellite dish ears, will be listening all over the place. They've also been frolicking about a bit, and I think that frolicking behavior, as much as it looks like it's play behavior, is probably also kind of anti-predator stuff, that they're looking around all the time, just checking to see if there's anything around. What an incredibly lucky time you've had on Arethusa today, with 2 leopards, 6 lions. Sounds marvellous. We're just going to drive a little bit off-road here, see if we can't get a slightly better view of the zebra especially. And they will be a little bit skittish of us, and like I've said, if they smell us, they can see us, right? I mean, their eyes are better than ours, they can see us perfectly well. But if they smell us, animals tend to react a lot more adversely. They tend to get a lot more frightened even though they can see us. Sneak a bit. Is that alright for you, Jean?
Okay.
Loving the new green grass. You can see. Right, let's go quickly across to Jamie. I think there's action going on there.
Guys, I know that this is a really difficult visual, but the leopards are coming up to the lions. Let me just stop and see. I'm on the opposite side of the dam. The lions are right there. I had the visual of the leopards. They are probably about 20 meters from the lions. The lions are watching them. I'm going to shift forward a bit to see if I can get a better view. They're coming for that buffalo. There's the leopard. See their view across the other side of the drainage line. Oh, there you go. She's running. There's a snarl. I think let me go backwards. Back around. I don't think the lion chased her. I think she went to chase her. But either way, Karula's come shooting back that way. Across the drainage line. Lions are up and moving, coming this way, to where Karula ran. Let's try and keep up. There's a lion. She did chase her. Sorry, I know that visual is very, very difficult. It was back in there across the drainage line. Where did Karula go? The lions are moving with purpose towards the leopards. I'm going to try and get you a good visual. Karula's run somewhere in this direction. The lions have stopped now. Must be somewhere here hiding in this drainage line. So you can see a lion looking back. It's the young males who've actually chased as well. Let's just stop for one moment. Karula just gave a growl and I just saw a flash of spots shooting towards us. Don't worry, they definitely didn't get her. And they definitely didn't get Tingana. I think she's just ducked down to the drainage line. The lions are as confused in this situation as we are. They're not sure where she's gone. Let's go see. That was incredible. I know it was very, very thick. It was just a growl from, it could either have been Karula or it could have been one of the lions. Go forward a little bit. Karula would have popped out somewhere here. She might, there's the lions. They're looking for her. They're looking for them actually. Forward, backwards a little bit for them. Get a good view. One of the young boys. They're scouting around, but they are definitely no match for those two leopards. Females is also approaching. Now Karula's gone to ground, I think somewhere in this drainage line, and she's just sprinted in and then ducked down. Tingana, I didn't see which way he went. Lions are looking. I did not expect those leopards to get so close to those lions without realizing. I'm just sitting for one moment. I want to see where the lions look and what they decide. They've decided to give it up. Now there's absolutely no way that they caught up with either of those leopards. They were too fast for them and far too camouflaged. But let's go down and see. Maybe they're going to pop out at the dam. They're going to move away from them. There's plenty of perfect hiding places for a leopard. Oh, leopard, in a tree. That's where Karula went. How incredible is this sighting? Where Tingana went, I honestly don't know. But it does answer a question for us which was asked this morning, which was whether or not Tingana's paw would disadvantage him, or whether adrenaline would kick in and he would move away really fast. And he has just disappeared. He might be up a tree somewhere around here as well. First point of refuge for a leopard away from a lion. Let's get a little bit closer to her. Now, she's tense and she's nervous because she's just been chased by lions. So I'm going to shift very close, not very close, very slowly, and not get too close. She's looking back towards the lions. I'm keeping my eyes peeled for Tingana as well. I don't know where he disappeared to. Right into the sun. Stop here for the moment just to let her get comfortable. There we go. You can see that look. She's looking back towards where the lions were. And that was an incredible interaction, but there's no way they were going to catch this clever girl out. No way. Karula's just been around the block too many times to get caught out by a couple of ranging lions. There's no way. Just the tip of her tail. She's gone up as far as she can into the knobthorn, and there she will stay until she feels a bit more comfortable. Now, that was an absolutely incredible interaction between the two. And I said earlier they were maybe 100 or so meters apart, and they were mating earlier. And Sarah in Ohio, you've asked a really good question, which was why wouldn't the lions go and investigate the leopard's mating, or the sounds of the leopard's mating? It's a good question. I think because they were too full-bellied and too lazy, they weren't going to go and actively seek her out. I think if they'd been lying in the sun with less full bellies, they might have gone to explore. But they're much less curious than leopards are, especially when they've just eaten. But as soon as those leopards got close enough to be even slightly vaguely a threat to the kill, then they were immediately up and about. Oh girl, yes, you're very clever. Those lions have gone, they're lying down. I can't see them from where I am, but I'm pretty sure they're just lying down. They've given up on the search. I said earlier that they are no match for the leopards, and what I actually mean in terms of answering Rocky Knight's question, yes, brute strength and size, absolutely, the lions would completely kill the leopard if they could get hold of her. What I meant was, in this particular environment, rocky drainage lines, thick vegetation and big trees, and two leopards that are pretty experienced in terms of dealing with lions like that, it becomes a much more even playing field. They're faster than the lions and they're more agile, and the lions didn't approach that in a very intelligent way at all. They just immediately shot out with lots of noise. So when I say they're no match for the lions, I don't mean strength, I mean skill and the way that they navigate, especially at an age that they're at, where both of them will have experienced this scenario multiple times before. And just to let you know, leopards do go and investigate lion sightings. It often happens. I want to shift forward because the vehicle, I want to try and get the sun on the other side of Karula as well, although that's a beautiful image. But the vehicle that's heading away from us, they were on the other side of the drainage line. I want to know if they saw... Oh, he's disappearing. Don't go. I want to know if they saw where Tingana went. I will ask in a moment. I think he's going to go back towards the lions. But we're going to stay with Karula for the moment. I want to shift onto the other side of her. She's perfectly relaxed with us. So I'm going to go up around so that we can see her from the other side. I'm actually going to roll forward. That's good. Further away from her, I can turn around so we can see, but that was an epic shot of her looking down at us. I just didn't want to stress her out by turning on my engine there. Now Donna Wan, you're concerned about Tingana. He does have a sore leg, he does have a limp. As I said, I think that adrenaline would have pushed him up into a tree. Oh, pathetic fallacy. Of all the drama, even the wind is adding to it. I think the adrenaline would have kept him moving. He would have been absolutely fine. And they're leopards that know what they're doing. They know how to go about this. There you go, Karuls. Well done, Karula. The consummate survivor as the winds swirl around her. And maybe that's actually what stopped the lions from investigating earlier. The wind was blowing straight from the buffalo kill towards the leopards, so the lions would not have got their scent. And actually maybe even the buffalo smell might have masked the lion's scent because it was directly between the two. And maybe those leopards were completely unaware that there were lions there, taken by surprise. So she's still panting a little bit, still stressed. Shame, girl. Don't think that was the way you were expecting your day to go. But don't worry, you outsmarted them. The speed at which that entire scenario played out was incredible. There was just a growl and a streak of spots. And bear in mind that Karula, when she wants to, she can cover ground probably at about 23 meters per second. That is incredibly fast. That's mind-bogglingly fast. 23 meters? What is that in feet? That's about 70 odd feet. My maths was just very quick calculation. That is fast. In 1 second. No shame. Looking less than impressed with life. It's alright, girl. And I think the biggest contributor in that entire scenario, that entire situation, was the wind. I think that's what really confused everything there. We're sitting looking at probably one of the most famous leopards, if not in the world, then definitely in the Sabi Sands, the Queen of Djuma, as she's known. But the Sabi Sands is a place known for its incredibly high leopard density, which is one of the reasons we get such phenomenal leopard sightings. And Mercedes, you were wondering if I know the total leopard count for the Sabi Sands. I honestly don't. There's certain territories around the Sand River that would have a far higher count than we have up here in the north. That was phenomenal. I'll look into the numbers for you, Mercedes, and double check. I'm not even going to hazard a guess because I could be wildly incorrect. An area like Arathusa and Djuma, if we combine the two of them, is about 1,500 roughly hectares, and we have probably about 6 leopards that we see regularly in that area. She's decided to brave coming down. I just want to let her use her senses to their full as she comes down. I want to just hold off repositioning for the moment, just to make sure she gets the best chance to work out where everything is. Very cautious. Down onto the ground. How smooth was that? And she is going to disappear. Alright, girl. Okay. You're okay. She's just moving off behind me. She's going to disappear. And at this point, I'm probably going to let her, depending on where she goes. I don't want to go crashing after her and stress her out any further. I just want to see if she tries to meet up again with Tingana. You can see the stress in her body language, the way that she's stopping, looking back. She was definitely the most unsettled I've ever seen Karula, who is fairly unflappable as a character. What an incredible day. Let's just go see which way she goes. Might be the same way Tingana went, we just might have missed him. But we saw her right up in the top of the trees, and I've said it's a really windy day. And Gracie, who is 8 years old, Gracie, you wanted to know if the wind could ever blow leopards out of trees, and I don't think so. I've certainly never heard of it happening. There is she disappearing off. I'm going to do a quick U-turn to try and catch her on the road. I don't want to follow her through the block, I really don't. Gracie, I've never heard of leopards being blown out of trees. I have heard of them falling out of trees. I've seen them fall out of trees. That wasn't because of the wind. It was just because they weren't really concentrating. Sometimes they're young and they fall out because they're still practicing climbing. There she goes. What could happen maybe, but it's very unlikely, is that the wind might blow a branch or something over, and that could knock a leopard out. But for the most part, they're built to balance in trees. They're the best tree climbers I could possibly imagine in terms of cats. Where is she going to go? She's going to come this side. Pop out here. Go, gorgeous girl. Well done. I wonder if she's looking for Tingana now. And not only are they brilliant tree climbers, but their senses are so much better than ours. They know so much more about what's going on. She will have known the entire time exactly what was happening in that moment where everything disappeared. And she shot off in one direction, and I think she'll probably know exactly where Tingana is. Trying to not put my engine on when I'm too close to her. Trying to keep the noise level to a minimum. She's going back towards that drainage line where we left her earlier. Let's go see if she's going to find Tingana there. She knows there's some thick vegetation here. There she is. Oh, whoops. Sorry, Ben. Put you right to the branch there. Let her come through, choose her own direction, and she's above us again as she was when she was in the tree. And Barbara, who's watching all the way from Texas, he wanted to know if there's ever been cases of leopards jumping out of trees and into cars, and the answer is probably there might be one or two isolated cases. It's very, very seldom that you actually get a leopard attacking people. And I certainly wasn't concerned there. But I'm sure that you'll find somewhere, if you go back in history, that a leopard has jumped into a car from trees. And that situation where they were mating and the other vehicle was below them, so a question about whether or not that was dangerous to the guests. She's going to come in front of us. Curious one, I don't think so. They were very distracted in what they were doing. It's a very different situation. I think she's looking for Tingana. I'm not sure. She's looking about. It could also be, of course, that she's unsettled about the lions. Maybe she's going to go in front of us. She needn't worry, because I don't think those lions are going to move from where they were now, unless she goes close again, which I don't think she's going to. Just going to get onto the Game Drive channel, because I know somebody's trying to get hold of me. Sorry, bear with me one moment. Yeah, station, this Mufuzzi Ingwe is now in the Scorva north of Red Dam, northwest of Red Dam. The other vehicle. Sorry, message coming through. Standing by. Yeah, that's affirmative. I think so. I haven't been back since. I've been switching around between the Ingwe and the Ingala, but I think they should still be there. Negative. I only have Karula here with me. I'm going to go around one corner and then I'm going to leave her be. will be with you 1 second. She's moving very quickly and the guys are wanting to come and join me, and I just want to let them know that I don't think it's a good idea. Okay, copy. I've just lost visual of her. She's mobile north out of the silver. I think your best approach now would be to go along past the pump house. I've got visual of her again. We're just very close to the pump house from that side. Sorry guys. I'm going to just guide one last vehicle into the sighting, and then I personally feel that we can leave her with just one person. I don't want to have two of us following her. So I'm going to wait for the one guide to arrive, and then I'm going to leave her be. And I'm going to those lines and see if there's any sign of Tingana in that area. Hello girl, well spotted Liam. Now, I want to just give you guys a little bit of a recap, especially if anybody's just joined us. And as a live safari, it can become very predictable. We were sitting with Tingana and Karula. We'd just been with the Tsalala pride, who were about 50 meters away, and they'd been feeding on that dead buffalo that I found this morning. And I think before that, Tingana and Karula were feeding on it as well, before being distracted by their mating activities and going for a drink. And at that point, I think the scent of the lions was hidden from the leopards. They didn't know that the lions were there. They mated and then decided to head back towards the buffalo to continue feeding. And as they did that, they spotted the lions. The lions ran at them. Karula shot off across the drainage line, covered about 50 meters in maybe 3 seconds, and disappeared up into the knobthorn, or went up into the knobthorn. I'm not too sure about Tingana. I know for certain that the lions did not catch him, because I promise you we would have heard that. So he's fine, I just don't know which direction he went in. But an absolutely incredible sighting. And that's why I'm keeping a little bit of distance from her now, before I shift around. She's relaxed a bit. Now that she's relaxing a bit, I'm going to relax a bit myself and take my foot off the brake. Oh. What an incredible afternoon sighting. Wow. I think that this interaction happens a lot between leopards and lions. We don't always get to see it. Yeah, she's between me and you. She's a little bit skittish, so maybe come slow. Yeah, affirmative. I think just because of those Ngala. Just guiding the other vehicle in. Okay. Now there's two of us in the sighting, and as I said, it's a personal opinion, but I would prefer to now leave her and leave her be. I don't think, because of the way that she's feeling, I'm just going to give her a little bit of space. So I think one vehicle is absolutely fine, but I think beyond that, it's time for me to pull out, especially since we've had the whole afternoon in. Not get stuck in the sand. And whilst I do that and try and squeeze under this log that's above my head, I'm going to answer Grace from Dallas's question about how far I think Karula travels at any one time. That's a difficult one. I think that it's probably the situation that she's maybe about 5 kilometers at the moment from the core part of her territory. Maybe even further actually, if we count the core part of her territory as around the Juma waterhole. That's where she likes to go, that's where she likes to have her cub. But it's probably, she can move anywhere up to 4 or 5 kilometers in a night if she wants to. It's just a matter of the circumstances. Now, I do apologize, but I'm going to have to get onto the Game Drive channel again. There's now other vehicles responding to the Tsalala Pride. So I need to make sure they know I'm coming, as well as leaving Karula. Also keeping an eye out for Tingana. I want to know how far he ran. Just waiting for an opportunity to interrupt them. Well, hold on a moment. Keep your eyes peeled for Tingana. You might have come across in this direction. There's a couple of big trees here. The weather is closing in. It definitely feels a bit more threatening than it did earlier. Our station's leaving Mufazzi Ingwe, one station on lock. Looks like she was mobile north-west along the Scorvo away from Red Dam. I'm going to poke my head down into the drainage line before we go back to those lines. I think we actually have to wait for our turn now at the lines. The other vehicles do want to respond, so I'm going to just poke my head down here and see if there's any sign of Tingana on this side. Stop here for a moment and do a quick scan. How's it? Are you on your way to those Ngala? Just checking in with one of the vehicles. I'm looking for Tingana on this side. I know that there's been a couple of answers to my question about that amazing looking insect that I had on my hand, and please bear with me, I will have a look at them when I get back to camp. Get all of your answers. I really do appreciate it. At the moment I just want to focus on finding where Tingana went, but thank you for that. I really do appreciate it when you guys respond. Now apparently it is a fire grid burnet moth, which makes sense with that incredible red color that it has. I'm not even going to vaguely attempt the Latin name right now, certainly not until I've seen it written down, but really, really interesting to know. And I promise you, now that we've spoken about that, I won't ever forget it. Now I want to do a loop up and around, and whilst I do that, let's head across to James, who has some waterbuck to show you, and I will be back with you a little bit later.
What an astonishing afternoon you have had with Jamie. I'm extremely jealous. I wish I'd been there, but you know, that's just the way things go, and how magnificent that you've got to see those amazing things with 2 leopards, 6 lions, chasing them around. Wow. Well done to all of you for sticking around and seeing it. Here are some waterbuck, not quite in the same league as what you've been experiencing, but perhaps a nice relaxing kind of mood come down after the excitement of those cats. We've been driving around and we've covered most of the roads on Djuma. I think all of the animals, or most of them anyway, are hiding from this quite exceptional gale that is blowing in from the east. It has kept going. It's got quite chilly. There's been no moisture that's come out of the sky yet though. So I think we'll just carry on driving and see what it brings. There is still that sense of expectation and excitement about the wind. We did see 2 herds of elephants. They were kind of melting into the bushes as we drove past them, and now a lovely little herd of female waterbuck. I think that's the first time I've said waterbuck, so if you happen to be a new viewer and you didn't know what we were looking at, that's what we're looking at. Waterbuck. A group of cows, and they're not too far from the Buffelshoek Dam, but I don't think they're necessarily going to rush there, given the lack of predators. That's why they're called waterbuck. Apparently they like to run to water when they're being attacked. I've never seen it myself, but apparently it does happen. Now just remember, I'm sure you know this, I'm sure Jamie's told you, but you are welcome to talk to us. We encourage you to talk to us. Questions at wildearth.tv or hashtag Safari Live if you're tweeting away like the water thickney that I can hear off at the Buffelshoek Dam. And tell us where you're from, and maybe tell us why you're watching, what sense that this wilderness experience gives to you. Certainly for us driving out here, it's the excitement. We don't know what we're going to find, and it's the atmosphere that the wild of the Kruger National Park gives to our souls. They'll be standing out in the open, and they'll be hanging around with those impala. Those are the other antelope that you can see there, because there is safety in numbers. And the impala will be very happy for the sensors added to their vigilance by the waterbuck, because there are just 2 of them, which is not very usual. I'm just going to sneak a little bit forward so we can get a view of them all. And I think what you'll also find as we watch them is that they will be sort of looking in all directions, so they won't all ever face the same way. I think these 2 rams are perhaps a little upset with each other. But I think you'll find that they'll all be looking different directions, some down the hill, some up the hill, some north into Buffelshoek, some south. And Buffelshoek is just basically, if you went straight through your TV screen, you'd head straight north into Buffelshoek, which is the property next door to us. And they're all looking in different directions. They're now currently watching a giant white lorry go past, which is something that is not unusual for a game reserve. That's why they suddenly looked a bit alarmed. There we go. What a lovely sighting. Anyway, I'm not sure what they're doing. They may be deeply lost. I also think that it's quite interesting that when they do hang around with other species, so you have those 2 impala who hang around with the waterbuck, I wonder how much inter-specific communication there is. So we know that things like these waterbuck will react to an impala's alarm call. We know they'll do that, and I often wonder if there isn't some additional communication that takes place, because obviously they're not, I mean, they compete slightly for grazing, but the more they can communicate with each other in terms of predator presence, obviously the safer they're going to be. And so I wonder if there isn't some kind of communication that takes place between species. We're so used to not really being able to talk to our dogs and cats, although some people say they can, and some people are definitely better at it than others. John, don't laugh, I'm not being facetious about it. Some people definitely have better ability than others to communicate with animals, and I suspect quite strongly that these animals are able to communicate with each other. possibly almost on an energetic level. I think they'll read body language far better than we will. They'll notice very subtle changes. Them all, they are very, very vigilant about what's going on. Smelling, listening, ears twitching all the time, looking different directions. And I'm surprised we haven't seen more in the way of sort of zebra and perhaps a few wildebeest out on these open areas where they can see what's going on, they can see what's coming. And I'm sure as it gets slightly darker, so that will be the case. They'll all come out into these open areas. For the moment, the impala are looking around, eating a little bit, and you will find that they won't graze for a great deal of time, and apparently there's a correlation between the size of an impala herd and the amount of time that they're prepared to have their heads down for per period. So two of them grazing together like this will be looking up constantly, although that one that we're looking at now doesn't appear to be particularly concerned. He's relying on the waterbuck and his mate to watch out for any predators that might be coming through. You can hear the wind blowing, you can see the sky is kind of turned a gunmetal grey and the clouds are scudding over us. But no moisture, like I say. It didn't look like there was going to be some rain. I think that was probably largely dust blown up by this unseasonal wind. Right, the Buffelshoek Dam is just around the corner, so I think we're going to go and have a look there. And let's see if anything has come down to drink. Perhaps a thirsty male leopard called Mvula. Any luck? We have been searching for his tracks, but haven't found anything yet. Right, let us go. Very peaceful little, almost bucolic scene, I think, after the tremendous predatory excitement that you had earlier. And also really lucky that you were able to enjoy it on your own. Right, for this next query, and it's an important one because it comes from a young fan of the wilderness. Isabella, you are just 4 years old. That is a good age to be. Your responsibilities are not great, and long may it remain so for you. You want to know if the ground here is like the beach. Isabella, it's not really. I'll show you why. You see how hard it is. It would be very difficult to build a sand castle here, Isabella. That's about the best I can do in terms of a sand castle. But what you find is that when we go into the rivers, into those dry river beds, they've got quite thick sands, a little bit like the beach, but there's no water in them, or there's very little water, and so the sand doesn't stick together like it does on the beach. But then it's a little bit more like the beach. And if we find some of that sand, Isabella, I will show you. But normally it's quite hard, and lots more sort of stones than there would be on the beach. So not a very good place for sand castles, but an excellent place for looking at animals and discovering other parts of the wilderness. Right, we'll of the Paul Simon of his life. So Devon, you live in Lafayette. for your heads here, everybody. Well, there's some herons going around there. We're going to keep going. Here, because they're being chased. So it's normally that because the predators will seldom follow them into the water. And that's not because the predators don't swim or can't swim. It's normally because they don't really like to swim. So that's why they run into water here. It's trying to keep safe. I'm very interested that you say that the cows go into water just before they die, and the deer also. I can only imagine that that's perhaps because they're in some kind of pain, and maybe the coolth of the water eases that pain away. I don't know. That's really interesting. But I've only ever seen it here, especially with wild dogs that chase animals. And they do tend to run into the water, but that's a mechanism of escape more than anything else. And there's a hippo. We're approaching Buffelshoek Dam from a different angle today. For variety, of course. They say it is the spice of life. So quite a distance, but I mean she could cover that in a night if she wanted to, but we don't know exactly where he is. Alright, from the hippo, let's go across to Africa's top predator, the lion.
And we're back again with the Tsalala boys, and I think they were largely responsible for chasing away Karula and Tingana. I think the females are still essentially back where we left them, but I can't quite tell. At the moment there's a bit of a lion blockade. They're looking very, very pleased with themselves, having chased the leopard away. I did look for Tingana. I can't see any sign of him anywhere. I'm absolutely convinced he is fine. I'm 100% certain that he's okay. He escaped quite happily. It's just a matter of where he went, and I think Karula might be looking for him now, but I did just want to give her some space. I was actually right about having just had a conversation with one of the other guides. I was right about to mention to you all to please keep an eye on the Arathusa Dam camera, because the Birmingham boys were on their way. So Christine, thank you for that message as well. They've just come across from right on the boundary with Elephant Plains, so they are there. Now I'm not going to respond to that sighting, first of all because there's lots of vehicles heading in that direction, but also because I feel like the weather is closing in, and very soon it might be time to start heading a bit closer to home. We've got a long way to go, Viam and I. Not a long way, but it will feel like a long way if the heavens open. And as you know, we've got a lot of electronic equipment that needs sheltering from the rain. There's our young male with the puncture wound on his back. That could have been in the scrap with the Nkumas, or it might have been reopened during a scuffle for food in the last few hours when they arrived at the buffalo kill. Looking a little bit, that's nothing serious, that puncture wound. It looks deep. Ah, there's one of our females. Oops, sorry there. Testing positioning. She's been feeding on the carcass by the looks of things. Walking with a very full belly. I think she did the instinctive lioness reaction to competition for food, which was to immediately start gorging herself as much as possible in the space she had. Now this is the young lioness, and there is a second lioness, and Gerda, you were wondering, same as I was, if the tailless lioness is there, and I think she is. I think she might still be at the carcass. She was lying at the back of the group when we first arrived, so I couldn't confirm if it was the one without the tail. But after that, I'm not too sure where she went. I think she's at the carcass, and I think it is the tailless lioness. Just having a quick post-meal clean. It's hard work chasing leopards, and you need to be well fed afterwards. We have a question from Audrey as we look at this very young male. And Audrey is in 4th grade and they are focusing on Africa this week. Audrey, you want to know how long do lions live? And generally it depends on if they're a boy or a girl. The boys have a slightly shorter lifespan because of the competition that they come into from other males. So they average out at about 10 to 12 years old. Lionesses can live a little bit longer, up to 13, 14. There's definitely recorded cases of them living up to 16 or 18, but those are really, really extreme cases. It's highly unusual in a wild situation. Generally, Audrey, the females live a little bit longer than the males. And for the males, that time of their life is almost entirely devoted to reproduction. So they spend most of their time trying to pass on their genetic line. In the next sort of few years, these lions are only about 2 years old, these young males, and when they get to the point of being a little bit older, then they will be able to try and compete for mating opportunities. But even then, it's only when they're about 5, 6, unless they really are competitive, about 5 or 6 years old, they finally get to have control of a pride and essentially a family. And that will again only last, typically in the wild, for about 2 or 3 years before they are pushed out by other males coming in. So it's a very, very short space of time that they have to pass on their genetics. This wind is very, very fierce. Now, I've mentioned that the Birmingham boys are at the Arathusa Dam, and I've also mentioned that these lions, these young males, have to be very, very careful of both impact with or conflict with the Birmingham boys or the Matimbas. They're definitely not big enough to be able to protect themselves in a fight, and their best defense is to stay out of their way. And Christine and Shamal, you were wondering how far away are we from the Birmingham boys, and should we be worried? The answer is probably not. It's unlikely to be too much of a risk. I think it was only 3 Birmingham boys that were at the dam, with a 4th lying further away, from what the guide mentioned to me. They're about 2.5 kilometers away from the dam. We're at Red Dam, they're at Arathusa Dam, so they're still quite far. The only real risk is if they smell this buffalo and decide they're hungry and start heading across in this direction. It's quite similar to what happened with the 2 Nguma lionesses a couple of weeks ago. And even then, I think this pride's first defense would be, or the first reaction would be, to immediately start running away. But again, unpredictable lion behavior. These lions could decide that Red Dam, they don't want to drink at Red Dam, they want to head further south and accidentally bump into the Birmingham boys. It's going to be one of those dark and windy nights where we've always said that hunting is so much easier, boys. It's going to be one of those dark and windy nights where we've always said that hunting is so much easier for these lions and leopards on dark, windy nights. But the same thing applies in terms of robbing them of their senses. And it could mean that a situation similar to what developed with the leopards could happen with these lions if they accidentally bump into them. I don't think so though. I think they're going to be absolutely fine. They certainly don't look too concerned. Now, there is a Miss Patton's 4th grade class who's watching us all the way from Missouri, and they're learning about lions this week, so let's chat very briefly a little bit about them. And VM, shall I give you a little bit more light? Yeah. Let's illuminate the situation a little bit. That's better. He keeps looking off at the back, and I promise I'm going to explain a bit more about lions in a moment. I think he's just being silly because the wind is blowing. He doesn't look too intense. So at the moment, there's been a bit of confusion about the various lion prides in the area. Typically, the ones that we have mainly seen in the past are the Nkahuma pride and the Styx pride, and they were dominated by the 2 Matimba males. The 2 Matimbas were then pushed out by the 5 Birmingham boys, who are now the ones sitting at Arathusa Dam at the moment. Let me just see what that female's looking at. I can't see anything. I need to distract whatever it is. She's not too intent about it, so it's definitely not a leopard. She's just looking off in that direction every now and again. She might have decided to move away. And then we have this Tsalala pride that we're sitting with, and as I mentioned before, they've moved up from the south. And there's a couple of overlaps between the various prides. There's a Talamati off in the east, there's the Salati males in the north around Buffelshoek. And essentially the way that lions work, imagine the males have these really big territories that they patrol and they guard, and they keep other males out of adult age. And then within that they have not one pride but several. So it can be 2, it can be 3, it can even be 4, depending on the way that the males are functioning. And what the males will do is they will rotate between the prides and alternate between doing that and going and marking their territory somewhere. And they're very, very strict about keeping other males away. Then the females, they are the guards of the genetic line. So they pretty much stick in one place for their entire lives. And if a female is born into a pride, she will always be with them unless there is some kind of event that causes them to split. And they stick in much the same home range, and it can be fairly big. I'm talking easily a couple of square kilometers or more. And what they'll do is they will move around through those home ranges, and as I said earlier, it's not like a jigsaw puzzle. It's not strict boundaries. It's more like a flexible, fluid territory depending on where the other pride is. But for the most part, they stay out of each other's way. He's also been scratched up a little bit. But lion behavior is fairly complex. Apparently the Birmingham boys are on the move and moving south. I assume that means towards Arathusa. Juma is to the northeast of where that dam is. But I know that a lot of people are passing on that message to us. Now, as I said, there are a couple of vehicles that are making their way into that sighting. So by the time we get to it being our turn, we are going to possibly be at the end of our sunset safari. But thank you for keeping us updated, and I would not be surprised at all if by tomorrow the Birminghams have come through and have settled around Djuma, or possibly even moved through, but hopefully settled. So we might be listening out for some sounds of them calling in the night. And I think that it would be very wise for this pride to stay well out of their way. I'm happy to hear they're moving south. It means they're moving away. We are north of the dam, so we're about 2.5 kilometers north of where they are. Much better place for these lions to be, and a better direction for the Birmingham boys to be moving in. But what an absolutely incredible time we've had. Now, it very often is these young males that are following a sort of a learning curve, and they initiate things like chasing leopards, and I've seen young males try to hunt rhino before. A lot of it is play and practice, although it would have been deadly serious if they had caught up with the 2 leopards. I'm quite sure that wherever they are, they have escaped from those deadly paws, just like the one we're looking at now. They're still tiny though, compared to looking at even Junior's feet. They are not big creatures, these young Tsalala males. We've watched them earlier coming back from feeding on that kill, and that female went and sat and had quite the wash and cleaned her paws and used her tongue to get rid of all of the excess fur and the excess grime around it. And Donna, you were wondering if lions get fur balls just like domestic cats do, and they do indeed. They clean in the same way. They have the same spines, even rougher, on their own tongues. So they collect a lot of fur and a lot of dirt, and it does form into a bolus, and they do cough it up every now and again. And I have seen them do it before. It's something I'm always on the lookout for, but it's quite hard to find. Well, I think I've finally got poor old Mrs. Putforth's name right. Mrs. Putforth is the teacher of the 4th grade class that's been sending through questions. And Madeleine, you were wondering what the craziest thing I've ever seen on safari is. And that is such a difficult question because I've had so many incredible experiences. I think that today was pretty much high ranking just because of the way it played out. We had the mating leopards, we had the lions, and then the leopards getting chased by the lions and running up the tree. I think it was a really exciting day, and so incredibly unexpected the way that it all played out. Light up that young male who is quite happily fast asleep on his back. But Madeleine, if I have to think about it, some of my craziest experiences haven't necessarily been experiences that I would say have been full of action or really exciting. They've been examples of animals behaving in a way that is totally unexpected. And it's one of my favorite things. It's the way that you learn about being out here. And elephants are always a good example because they demonstrate such interesting and complex behavior. There's never a one answer to the way it all works. That's one of my favorite things, and I'd say my craziest experiences have come from that. But I've had a couple of really scary encounters, a couple of scary times when things have come running. They are big and they are wild, and that's part of the fun of being out here. But this has definitely been an exciting day, very high up on my list of crazy safari times. The wonderful thing is, you're never ever bored. There's never a time when you go out on a game drive and you think, that nothing crazy has happened when you get home. There's always something to learn about and know about. Oh, sorry, fruit chafer. Look at that sky. It's coming slowly. I'm hoping it's going to mean some serious rain. Now, I've mentioned that the weather is closing in. Earlier, when we started the sunset safari, that wind that was blowing was a bit like standing in a hairdryer. It was very, very warm. So Pamela, just to answer a little bit about your question, it was hot wind. It suddenly turned round about the time that we found these lions the first time, as it started to get cloudy, and all of a sudden it went incredibly cold. And it was so unexpected. Liam, the wildebeest, being the gentleman that he is, has actually donated his jacket to me, which I'm very, very grateful for, because I was sitting shivering. I don't handle cold well, so a big thank you to Liam for that. And I do think there's a storm on its way. I really hope, honestly, not until the end of the sunset safari, obviously, but I really hope there's some kind of storm on the way. It's just felt like it's been building and building and building over the last few days, that really humid feeling. And I'm hoping that this might give us a little bit of a break. Sun slowly going down. I don't think that these lions are going to be up to very much. I think they are going to sit with very full bellies, but at least they managed to find some food and spend a little bit of time scavenging. Admittedly, I don't think these lions had anything to do with that dead buffalo. I still think my suggestion is probably the most likely. But at least they've had a good meal. They looked as though they needed it, especially some of these young males. A couple of hip bones protruding, especially at the back there. I said that there is a rainstorm on its way, possibly, and Susan is watching in Cleveland, and she's watching along with her 4-year-old granddaughter Melody. Now Melody, you want to know if people in South Africa do rain dances, and they do have their own specific rain-inducing ceremony that they do. I'm not too well versed of it. Melody, I know you really want me to demonstrate, and I might give you a demonstration of a rain dance at some point, but I definitely can't do it right next to these lions. But what we could do is ask James if he would like to do it, because he doesn't have any lions sitting next to him, and if I'm going to do a proper rain dance, I have to get out of the car to do it, and unfortunately I don't think that they would like it very much. But Melody, I think we should pass that question along to James, and maybe he will demonstrate a little bit of a rain dance. Hopefully, fingers crossed, not in the rain, although it looks like it is on its way. Let's see if these lions have not moved. I think it's time that we left them. I'm going to start moving back just in case it starts to pour down, and whilst I escape from the lions and hopefully from the incoming rain, I believe that James is ready to do a rain dance for Melody. So let's head across to him. Melody, I hope you're watching. Enjoy your rain dance, and I will catch up with you a little bit later.
An unusual request from Melody. Melody, you are just 4 years old and a fan of the wilderness, and you're most welcome. You apparently are the granddaughter of Susan and Cleveland, and would like to see a rain dance. Now, Melody, we don't have rain dances hugely here in South Africa, but apparently there is one up in the Venda, which is just north of here. So we've got the Shangaan people here, and then the Vendas up north of here. And Jandre, who's on camera, has very kindly agreed to show us the dance. So we're going to get out in front, to the front of the car, and we're going to do the dance for you now. Come, Jandre. Come on, Jandre. This is a genuine rain dance. You see, I really didn't know the rain dance, so here we go. Come, Jandre.
I need to operate camera, James.
Set the focus. Come on. I'll do some warming up exercises while Jandre makes his way around here. You all get to see Jandre. Here he comes. I can see him through the blinding white lights. We may be flattened by a buffalo at any stage. Right, Jandre, would you start to sing?
Mangwane pula le iswele pula Mangwane pula le iswana me pula Mangwane rain coming out of the sky Mvula yan Mvula is go fika manje.
Very good. Thank you very much. Melody, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. We, of course, now don't feel particularly proud of ourselves, but there you go. So the first little bit of that was actually very genuine Venda. The rest of it was absolute nonsense. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Well done, Jandre. Don't you feel better now after having done that for us? Thank you, Melody, for your request. Now, totally off the subject of a rain dance, smiles for rice. In Ontario, you want to know if we get dusties here. I'm assuming, do you mean like a dust devil, I'm assuming? Oh, dusties. Dusties, sorry, okay, sorry. No, we do get dusties here. You mean hyrax, the rock hyrax. Yes, we do smiles for rice. We don't get them in this particular reserve, but they're found in the Kruger. On the big rocky outcrops, you'll find dusties. And I've seen plenty around the Kruger area, but there are no rocky outcrops here on Djuma, so we are highly unlikely to find any dusties here. And for those of you who don't know what a dusty is, it's a small, lives in a family almost all of its own, not many members of the family, and their closest relatives are actually elephants. They're about that big. And you get a rock hyrax, which lives in the rocks, that's a dusty, or you get a tree hyrax, which is a bit smaller, and they unsurprisingly live in trees. And they make an astonishing noise at night. Hyraxes, where my parents live on the eastern, you can hear them at night in the bush, in the coastal bush, and they make a terrible screeching noise. And it sounds, if you don't know what's happening, it sounds like someone being murdered, but it isn't. It's just the tree hyraxes calling to each other in the night. Ooh, we had a request earlier for one of these. There it is, Jandre, can you see it? On the road, a shongololo or millipede. And I forget it. And Ashley in Derby, in soggy Derby, in the United Kingdom. There you are, there is your songololo. I'll tell you what, I'll go and fetch him for you. We'll put him back. I don't think he'll be too upset with us if we go and fetch him. And we'll put him on the dashboard for you to have a look at. Simply because it's a bit soggy in Derby. No more rain dances. What you'll do is curl up around the stick, well, if you do it properly, and then he should be pretty easy to transport. There we go. There you go, fella. He's a good size shongololo, this chap. some light on him now. There you are, Ashley. Wonderful fellow he is. We'll just keep him on the dashboard. No, don't go. There we go. Look at the wave motion of his legs. Isn't that amazing? Now, he belongs to a very ancient order of insects, not insects, of invertebrates or arthropods, called the Myriapoda, meaning 1,000 foot. Isn't he amazing? His little feelers looking where he's going. No proper eyes, you see, so it's done mostly by smell and by, smell and feel. And he is also, the interesting thing about these chaps is that they seldom get eaten because they have cyanide in that shell. So you can see the jointed shell that he's got, and they've got cyanide in that, and that's why they're seldom eaten. There is a mammal out here called a civet that specializes in eating them, but they're not many things. Alright, let's put him back now. I'll put him back into the bush, away from the road, so that he doesn't have to get run over by the next car that comes along. There you are, old fella. Good luck. Millipede, Myriapoda. There you are, Ashley and Derby. I don't think I've ever had a request from Millipede before, which you're most welcome. And now, of course, I mustn't, just for the kids out there who are watching, I know we've had Isabella and Melody, both aged 4. Don't go into the bush and pick things up unless you know exactly what they are. And preferably not without adult supervision, because you just never know. Something like that can be actually quite poisonous if you're not careful. Actually, a few questions about the millipedes. How long do they get? Well, you get a number of different species of them. There's not only one species. The biggest one I've seen has been about a foot long, actually, so that's pretty big. And you find them all over the country, so about that big. And then you want to know why all the legs, apart from getting around, which is, I don't know, actually. They're very ancient. Looking here, there's blown me down. I think that's a leopard track. Karula might not be beyond our reach yet. Actually, I can't imagine. You know, each of those joints that you saw in this exoskeleton has got a pair of legs on it, and I suspect that. I mean, I don't think it's a particularly effective way of getting around. It's very inefficient. They're very slow. You've got to use a huge amount of energy. Obviously, a huge amount of coordination to make an animal like that able to move. So, actually, I'm afraid I can't tell you. I don't know why. I suspect it has something to do with how ancient they are and the prehistory that they come from, but I couldn't tell you. Very good question. I shall give it some thought. Myriapoda. And if you look at a centipede, for example, which doesn't have 100 feet ever, but it's got many more than an insect, they are much faster. So certainly some of those beetles with only 6 legs are even faster still. So I don't think it's got too much to do with locomotion, so much as perhaps just as the millipedes got larger, and perhaps they got larger because to avoid predation, so they just needed more in the way of feet. I did think I saw some leopard tracks back there. I'm not entirely sure in this kind of light. So we'll just keep driving along, hoping that I see my favorite old friend Mbula. Fill me with a deep sense of excitement. The wind continues to blow, and I'm sure that you saw it blowing with Jamie. But again, I mean, we've had bits of blue sky sort of scudding up overhead, so I don't think it's going to rain on us. It certainly doesn't feel like rain, and it doesn't smell like rain either. It smells a bit like winter dust, which is odd for this time of night, this time of year. Keep looking at the ground here to see if there are any further tracks.
it seems like James has disappeared. Now, I believe that James was giving a demonstration as to different spotlight techniques that he's used over the years. Something I didn't realize I was doing was this. But when you're a foot shorter than most of the people around you, having a little bit of extra reach allows you to get just that little bit further in to the bushes. That being said, it is exhausting to the arm muscles, especially when you've been lugging boxes all day as I've been. I'm going to return to a slightly more sedate technique with the lower arm. Now, I do wish I could have seen Melody's rain dance from James, but I bet it was absolutely incredible. Bumpy road. And perhaps something that should be repeated on the odd occasion. What an incredible day it has been. I'm heading back towards home, slowly but surely. I don't want to be caught out when the storm does break. During our incredible day, spent a little bit of time with the Tsalala pride, and we noticed that they had some wounds, especially the young males, puncture wounds on the back of their bodies. And Judith, who's watching from North Carolina, good evening, and I hope you have enjoyed your sunset safari. You wanted to know if lions ever get blowfly larvae in their wounds, and the answer is yes, they can. They get a couple of different things. They sometimes get maggots in there as well. But the maggots, of course, are helpful. They're beneficial because they eat away a lot of the necrotic tissue that might be living around the wound. But generally, you'll find that lions lick and lick and lick at wounds. They keep them from getting too infected. They scrape away. They sometimes keep it open that way, but they'll scrape away most of the parasites that might settle there. But generally, lions in terms of parasites and hygiene are not the cleanest animals out here. And I've always, in my experience with lion relocation and lion capture, is that you don't ever touch a lion with bare hands. You can, especially around their saliva, you can pick up all kinds of interesting parasites. You'll always find, if you look carefully enough in the scat of predators or in their vomit, which sometimes they do, you'll always find some kind of parasite. Sorry, giraffe. I thought you were a bush baby, but you're a giraffe. Obviously, we don't spotlight daytime animals. We don't want to take away their night vision. The other advantage to my technique of spotlighting is you don't necessarily always get the cord trapped in your steering wheel, as I just did. Oh, sorry, boys and girls. Take that light off you. Sorry, fellas. Off you go. We travel along in the dark. Gil, you were wondering if the fact that Karula is mating with Tingana, what does that mean? Does that mean she's definitely not pregnant from the last session? Now, for those of you who weren't watching at that time, Karula was mating with Tingana a couple of weeks ago. And yes, absolutely it means that she's not pregnant. It means that that particular mating session was not successful. And it could be that because Karula's getting older, she's not as fertile as she used to be. But it does happen with leopards that cubs, then that first estrus cycle will be a false estrus. that they'll come into about 2 weeks after losing a set of cubs. Not to say she did. I don't think she did in this particular instance. It could just be that she's not quite producing the same number of eggs as she was as a younger leopard. We've also been, so windy, also been asked a question about if she was mating, when would those cubs be born? So what is the gestation period of a leopard? And it's about 105 days, 100 to 105 days, depending on the leopard, of course. Roughly about just over 3 months, slightly longer than a lion. But that will also be dependent on the area that the leopard is from. So we'll have to give it 3 months, or no, we don't necessarily have to, because to find out if she's pregnant, if we manage to keep tabs on her and her movements, if we want to find out if she's pregnant, if she's not, she will then come into estrus again in a couple of weeks, just as she's done before, and start mating once again. And given her regular sightings, maybe not so much with me, she has a tendency to avoid me. When I do see her, this has probably been the best Karula sighting I have ever had, and I have loved every minute of it, because quite often she disappears off as soon as I find her. I've had a couple of basically 5-minute sightings with her, so it was really, really special today to get to spend so much time with her, to really get a better idea as to her character. We've spoken a lot about the fact that often females will try and mate with as many males as possible as a way of keeping their cubs safe from the males within their territory. Although in this case, the last 2 times, Karula's only mated with Tingana. If we compare it for example, to her daughter Shadow, who mated not in her last session, but the one before that, she mated both with Tingana and the dominant Anderson male off to the west. And it could be that Karula just feels more comfortable with the fact that her territory occurs right in the middle of Tingana's. And the reason behind that is the answer to Wolfgang's question, who's watching all the way in Sweden and is one of our regular viewers. And you wanted to know, will unrelated males kill the cubs of females if they find them? And the answer is absolutely they will, because it's, as with lions, it is a male leopard's mission in life. Female, if her cubs survive to independence and adulthood, it will take a female about 1.5 years, maybe even more, to start mating again. Shadow being the exception. We did see her mating very early, but that is the general pattern. And in fact, of the cubs that are killed before they are 1 year old, they think that somewhere in the region of 50% of them are killed by other male leopards. But should be, you might even, bless you there, all the dust. He might even share kills with them on occasion, as was seen with Tingana, Shadow and Sindile. It has been a truly magical afternoon, and I'm so glad that I could share it with all of you watching. I hope you've had a fantastic time. And we've certainly learned a great deal, which is, of course, one of the most wonderful things about these live safaris. And I'm about to be blown away, as you can tell by my hair flying across everywhere. So I just want to say a big thank you to VM, the wildebeest. Whoop, take my foot off the clutch. for all of his fantastic camera work, as well as his very gentlemanly offer of his jacket, because it is rather chilly. And I will catch you all tomorrow, I think, for the sunset safari, but join us for the sunrise safari. There's going to be so many exciting things happening. Have a wonderful day wherever you are, and enjoy your last few moments with James. Bye-bye.
Well, everybody, we've come pretty much to the close of our show this evening, and you haven't seen much of me, and that's probably a good thing, but wow, you've had an incredible day on Arethusa today. Now, Pamela, Joe, Matty, Diane, and Genevieve, and many others, thank you for sending through your tweets about what WildEarth means to you, or what being around here means to you. You say it's got quite a lot to do with learning about Africa and bringing you closer to nature, and certainly giving you some kind of connection to one of the world's most ancient wilderness areas is one of our goals, and certainly one of my goals. So I hope that in some small way we managed to achieve that. And thank you all, of course, for your very kind compliments for the rain dance that Jean-Dre and I did earlier. I must just apologize to Jean-Dre, because he said, no, I don't want to do it in front of camera, and then I just threw him under the bus, and he came and was a very good sport. So thank you, Jean-Dre, for your efforts today.
Yeah,
thank you to Jamie and Viam for holding the fort with all the cats in the whole Sabi Sands. Wonderful of them. Thank you to Tara of the twiddling knobs, and to Jerry of the tapping fingers, and to Eugene and everybody else. Tomorrow, Scott will be back. I'm not sure who else will be on drive. We'll see you then at 5:30 in the morning. Bye-bye.